Welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria, and welcome back to yet another Metroid Monday. And today we're going to be tackling the Space Pirate Hideout in phendrana. Now, the goal of today is about as simplistic as it gets. We need a specific upgrade, and they're going to give it to us. The upgrade in question is the thermal visor. Now, this is an upgrade that actually has a fair bit of history behind it. The first instance of an X-ray or thermal visor is actually in Super Metroid, where Samus has the ability to see through walls and see what damages other items, or could give her access to areas that otherwise would be inaccessible. In this, however, it acts as a second vision, a new way of looking at the world that tends to give more detail or different detail at any given moment in time. Needless to say, its use is as self-explanatory as it gets. However, there is a little bit more to it in old story from Retro Studios. See, Retro was having some issues in the early development of the game. And while the whole story is probably a lot more complicated than I can get into here, there was a initial visit with Shigeru Miyamoto, I believe it was, CEO at Nintendo Japan. And he had asked a relatively odd question. What would it be like if Samus had a bug head? And the developers at Retro had absolutely no idea where to take that statement. And rightfully so, most of us would come to a very similar wait, what? Conclusion. Um, their interpretation of this question was the exchanged visors, allowing Samus to see in X-ray vision, see echoes, see sounds, see items that would be otherwise inaccessible to the naked eye. That was the entire point. So, knowing that, knowing how Samus functions in that way, knowing that she can actually see things beyond the realm of the mundane, stands to reason that she would have a unique perspective to give, shall we say. Now, as you can see, we're slowly making our way through here, and so far so good. All the holograms have been working pretty well as expected. There are a lot of hidden items in here that I wish I could get on a first pass, such as missile tanks. I think there's a health upgrade in here as well. But I'll take what I can get when I can get it later, whatever that ends up looking like. I also have to say that the wave beam, I think, is criminally underused in my prior playthroughs. The ability to shock and hold an opponent in place while effectively pelting them is one that I have taken for granted. And that is something that I'm noticing as I'm playing the game more, especially this playthrough, is I'm taking advantage of some of Samus's more niche abilities, or not niche per se, but different perspectives on the same abilities, using the special effect of one ability to stall opponents, for example. And honestly, I think that's a good thing, because I was having a discussion with a friend the other day about whether or not certain characters could exist in other universes. And, well, it piqued our interest. Who could survive in certain circumstances? Who would be able to finish another character's game? And the story actually got turned to the Doom franchise, and how the Slayer himself is this monumental, godlike being. But we broke down the abilities of the Slayer and the defenses, the attack potency, you name it, to the best of our abilities. It became pretty clear that Samus would have an absolute heyday in that universe, because many of the abilities that Samus has are equal to or outstrip the abilities of the characters within that universe. Now, this isn't to say that this is something that I get into often, but it might be a look into a potential side series where I pit different characters from different universes against each other. Who knows? At this point in time, however, here we are. This particular room at the moment is a galaxy map, so to speak. Each post at the corner of that central pillar opens up to reveal a galaxy-wide map that shows information on the planet Zebes, SR388, as well as, I believe, K2L and Talon 4. Now, what I like about this as a... Wow, that was kind of pathetic. What I like about this room as a whole is that the information presented in this area is very different from the information presented in the other lore rooms, so to speak. Everything lore-wise that we've gotten up to this point had to do specifically with specific races, different groups, or just the calamity that fell upon Talon 4 itself, not necessarily on a wider or aggregate basis. What I like about this is it adds a little bit of flavor and a little bit of history for those who haven't played through the series. And one that I would greatly recommend going into reading all little bits and pieces in here, as it adds so much more to the franchise and a lot more to just show more of what it is that Samus has accomplished in the now 30 years of Metroid games. Now, admittedly, I recorded this probably about a week ago. I was excited about doing this, and, well, the fact of the matter is I was not thinking about what that lore could actually showcase and what I could use with it in this video. So unfortunately, I have to admit that I didn't read it. At least not this playthrough. We're going to keep on keeping on, and we're going to head up into the next major area, but first, the super missiles. Now, the super missiles in prior games acted as one of the top 4 most damaging and devastating weapons in that respective game. Looking at Super Metroid, for example, the super missiles had a huge boost in their capabilities, because there was not only missile tanks, but super missile tanks, separating them into 2 very distinct categories of weapons, which meant that you could prioritize higher damage or lower damage depending on how dangerous you believed your opponent was. I like that, but I kind of prefer the way that the Prime Trilogy goes about it, in that the super missiles exist and are always part of Samus's kit once she gets it, or gets the upgrade, but that the super missiles are also a amalgamation of other weapon, or of the power beam, specifically the charge variety, as well as a missile, wielding wielding 5 missiles at one time. It deals an insane amount of damage to a target but it also has homing capabilities, which, honestly, is fantastic. I love that part. I love how visceral that reaction is. It shows just how devastating Samus's weaponry actually is when she uses the full extent of her power. Now, if you've been watching my series or my channel for a while, sorry, you'll know that I have a Super Smash Bros. 64 on the go. And Samus was the first and only character to beat the classic mode on the hardest difficulty on the first attempt. Which I honestly think is fantastic because Samus, among the original 12, is easily the most powerful character in Smash 64. What I like about this, however, is also part of what frustrates me. Samus in Smash 64 is far below her capabilities. And you need to look no further than the fact that she gets beaten up by a monkey. Anyways, we have the Metroids. These guys are a Talon Metroid. Now, I'm not entirely sure how the Metroids of Talon 4 correlate to those of Planet SR388. My assumption is that the Talon Metroids are not as potent, or perhaps a weaker variant of these or subspecies. But that is not something that I have the answer to. At least not myself. I'd love to have an answer. I would love to say, oh, these ones are stronger, weaker, or what makes them different. I don't know. What I do know is that the Metroids were bioengineered to be able to tackle certain, to be able to metabolize the X parasite. Now, what I like about this aspect of the character, or of the species, is that in Metroid 2, they not only had the biological engineering to be able to say, oh, this is what we want. Oh, thanks for helping me out there. Just give me a second. Just gonna get some health here. La-di-da. And we're gonna tackle him now because he's done his due diligence. He's already helped me out very much. No, I shouldn't name him. That would be cruel. Goodbye. But Talon Metroids, to my knowledge, the X Parasite only existed on SR388 and 388 and potentially on ZDR. There has been no definitive statement on the prevalence of the X Parasite throughout the universe of Metroid. So that would be a interesting sidestep. Would be learning more about that in a grander scope. And while I'm thinking about it, a lot of games have been turning towards what I'll call a multiverse theory. Multiverses are great in some cases and awful in others. If your story hinges on a multiverse, there has to be enough differentiating between it to have it make sense. Metroid technically has a multiverse. One that I'm not exactly the most receptive of. The Prime Trilogy exists in its own separate universe according to Nintendo. personally, I found that the Prime games existed on their own reasonably well within the timeline of the original franchise. However, knowing that there are certain aspects of the character in the Prime trilogy that do not mash up or mesh well with the original series, specifically Super Metroid and Fusion, I have to kind of question whether or not it is, if we could confidently say that Samus is a totally different character, or if there's just more to this universe uh, than we knew at first glance. My personal opinion of it is that the Prime trilogy does exist within the grander timeline. However, the plot inconsistencies, such as the Metroids existing on Talon 4, despite them being very, uh, engineered for, at least on SR388, for there to be a maximal level of them, or maximal number of Metroids, means, in my mind, that they are perhaps a weaker species or a subspecies, not the originals. And I have to be clear about that. The other thing that kind of has to be talked about, the elephant in the room, is one that I will actually be getting into at a later date, because I think that there's a lot more to this theory than a lot of people might actually believe. And it is that the most despised Metroid game in the franchise, released in 2010, does not actually have the original Samus. Now, if there is any reception on this particular take, I will elaborate. But know that there is more to, or that there is a fair bit to this theory that I've been putting together for quite some time. And I hope that mayhap it puts together some of the pieces of information that people have been missing out on. And I believe that's the last of the Metroids in this room, I think. Now that we have our bug head on, it's going to be easy enough to get from A to B to C. Oh, nope, one more Metroid. Okay. Okay. It's a parasite, dominant species of SR388. Okay. So it's a little bit of a plot inconsistency, but one that can be perhaps waved away as, because there is no queen that we know of, or perhaps that the Metroid Prime was a mutated queen, that after its defeat, the Metroids die off on Talon 4. Or were taken off to Aether, who knows. That's my hope for it, at the very least. But who knows? Actually, I'm sure there's some little tidbit that I missed that actually does elaborate on that. Oh, there are more Metroids in here than I thought. Okay. So I'm just gonna release Steve here. Hey, Bob, leave me alone. I gotta get through this. Steve will have... Steve needs to eat. Leave him be. Anyways, we've gotten all of the upgrades in this area that I'm aware of, and I believe that there's only a couple side upgrades in this area that I won't be able to get. Notably, one of the keys to the impact crater. which happens to be directly above my head, or at least the access point to it. Now, one thing that a lot of people tend to shy away from with the Prime series is the endgame MacGuffin hunt. I think it gets more hate than it deserves, first of all. The endgame MacGuffin hunt, be it the artifacts, the Sky Temple keys, or just the batteries to get access to the final area, are part of the world for a reason. My opinion of it is that the artifacts and Sky Temple keys all of those endgame MacGuffins have a purpose, in that it's supposed to incentivize the player to turn around and actually do a deep scrub of the world, immerse oneself. It's not all about the instant progress, it's learning about the world, its creatures, the habitats, it's learning about Samus as a character, and really trying to build out what Samus can and cannot do at that particular moment in time. At least that's my perspective on it. I believe that it is notable that Samus as a whole should be able to defeat the Metroid Prime. But gearing up for those final two battles in facing off against the Metroid Prime and Ridley, one after another, it's meant to really show, at least in my opinion, how far Samus is willing to go to make sure that she is prepared for these battles. Okay, I think that's the last upgrade for this area. Hey, Jerry. Jerry, enjoy your meal. I'm just gonna run away here. Bye-bye. And, with that, the pirates are gonna have themselves a lot of fun. Jerry's gonna have himself quite the meal. And, yeah. Anywho, this is taking a lot longer to get through the Space Pirate hideout than I was expecting. So, I think I'm gonna have to call it short in the near future here. What I can say for certain is that next time, we'll be starting off by tackling Thardus, gaining the Ice Beam, and mayhap taking a bit of a detour to get ourselves the gravity suit, although that may come with a little bit in 1 to 2 episodes. We'll see how that goes. And in case anybody's curious, next time I will also be taking a little bit more of a deep dive into the speedrunning of Metroid Prime's GameCube version. To be clear, as each version has its own speedrunning community. Anywho, if you like what you see, drop a like, leave a subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Until then, I hope you all have a good one.